Well, hello Divi Nation, and welcome to a brand new Divi use case live stream where each week we give you a new design and functionality that you can add to your Divi websites. And in today's live stream, what we're going to be doing is showing you how you can create responsive fluid Divi modules. And don't forget to check the video description for more info on this use case. And let's go ahead and jump in and get started. All right, so welcome everyone. Make sure that you can hear me. To let me know, give me a thumbs up. Also, let us know where you're from in the chat. Introduce yourself, and we will get cracking today. Hope everyone's doing well. The chat's open again. Don't forget, let me know if you can hear me okay. That's really important. So I'll be looking for that. And as we're trickling in here, just a reminder, today what we're going to be doing is creating responsive fluid Divi modules. And excited to show you what that is, how you can do it. I'm going to give you a little sneak peek preview of the final result here in a moment. All right, we got Marcy from Texas. Represent Texas. I'm from Houston area myself. Welcome. And I'm assuming I'm good to go. Yes. Okay. So I'm still waiting on the thumbs up for that you can hear me okay. Thanks, Mike from Canada. And the Geeky Traveler, what a great name. Can you show the final sneak peek? Yes, I can. That's what I'm going to do right now. So here we go. So here it is. This is what it looks like, kind of like on a desktop view. These modules are built with some, special, with a special font size that kind of that makes it fluid. All the elements are going to basically remain fluid or kind of like elastic. So as you can see here, I'm just going to go ahead and inspect this so you can see it. All right, so this will help show what it's going to look like as we shrink the browser. So as we go, you'll see that the modules will scale fluidly as we get to the smaller sizes on mobile. And this, as you can see, this is kind of different from your traditional responsive technique or method where it kind of breaks at certain breakpoints using media queries, things like that. This fluid design for these modules will allow it to, keep that consistent design throughout the transition to smaller browser widths. So as you can see, every element in that module is going to scale fluidly and keep all the spacing, the font, the button, text, all of that is going to kind of scale fluidly with the browser. And that's because it's going to be based on a relative length unit, which I'll go on and describe to you how that works and how to use it with a Divi module. We had previous tutorials on our blog fairly recently on how to create fluid typography, how to create a fluid button in Divi. So this kind of takes it to that next level to show you how to add it to an entire module in Divi. So that's where we're going today. All right. Thanks for the thumbs up, Steve and Ivo from Croatia. I hear it's beautiful over there. I've always wanted to go. Thank you, guys. If you are just joining us, I see you, Dominique. Thanks for the love. Or Dominic. If you're just joining us, I do want to welcome you to this week's Divi Use Case live stream. We do it every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern. And today we're showing you how you can create a fluid Divi module. And don't forget to check the video description for a link to the blog post that goes along with this use case. And also, if you don't have Divi yet and want to check it out, I included a link to our product page as well in that video description. So don't forget to check that out. It's going to help you a lot. All right. So next, what we're going to do is get started. So let's see. The first thing we're going to do is create we have our section. We're going to create our row and column here. And to do that, let's go ahead and do a single column row. So I'm building in the Divi builder on the front end so we can see it all visually. And before I went ahead and added my one column row, but before I jump in and add my module, I'm going to customize the row settings a bit. So I'm going to go to my row. And one thing to keep in mind when you're creating something fluid, like a fluid Divi module, that you got to remember that you don't want to constrict it or limit the fluidity, if you can use that term. I think that's a word, with the container that it's in. So in this case, the container of a module would be its column. So we want to make sure that column gives it enough room to expand and, contract as needed on different browser widths. All right. So I'm in my row settings. So I'm opening up my column settings though. So let's do that. Not yet. Go back to row settings. I lied. Sorry about that. So in my row settings, we're going to go under the design tab. And let's go ahead and change the sizing option here. We're going to do a custom gutter width. So I'm just going to set it to 1. That's going to take out any margin in between elements, in between columns, things like that. And then I'm going to set my width here to auto. So if you didn't know you could do that, you can. You can set the width of your row to auto, which is going to make sure any child elements within that row, like the column or the stuff inside the column, that row will adjust in width accordingly. And then I'm going to give it a max width of 100%. Good. And then let's go down to our spacing and let's just give it a little spacing. I'm going to do the 5 VW on the top and bottom. Since we are using fluid design, I'm just going to use the VW length unit, which is based on the viewport width, which is going to kind of keep that consistent design even more. All right, let's save that out. Now you can see our row there. Let's go ahead and create our module next. So we have our row ready to go. Our column we're going to come and set up our column a little bit later. We're going to do some awesome things to that to make sure that our modules will work like we want them to, keep that fluid design. But for now, let's go ahead and build our module. So I'm going to create a call to action module. So I'm going to add a call to action module. As you can see, it's spanning the full width of the row right now. So, but we're going to customize it. I'm going to keep things simple here as far as design goes. Just to show you the functionality, you can always go back in and add your own custom design to the module. But we're going to be concentrating on how to turn this module into a fluid module that adjusts seamlessly and on different browser widths. So Let's keep the title and the button text the same. In order to make that button show up though, we need to add a link. So I'm just going to add this little hashtag there in the link URL so we can see our button. And just a quick note, you can use the same technique on any module in Divi. I'm just using the call to action module because, you know, it's a popular module. Also, it includes 3 elements: the title here, the description text, and then the button. So every module will have different elements that you can, you know, customize. But this one has 3. I'm keeping it simple to show you guys how to do it. All right. All right, let's go ahead and add a background color to our module. I don't like this blue. Let's just do a different, darker, kind of bluish gray here. And next thing we're going to do, and this is very important, we're going to go to Advanced tab first. And we're going to go to the Custom CSS tab because we're going to add a root font size to the entire module. So this is important for fluid design because what we're going to do is we're going to make every element that we adjust on our module kind of relative to the font size. Now, even though this font size kind of isn't directly attached to anything, it serves as the root font size of that module. In fact, your entire Divi site or theme or whatever does have a root font size. I believe it's like 100%. And if you're using the Divi theme, I think it's by default 14 pixels is your root body font size. So what this does is kind of override that at the module level and give it a root font size. Now, it's not just going to be any font size. It's going to be a font size that has an element of fluid design or a fluid font size, which is going to scale with the browser width. And to do that, we're going to add a font size using the clamp function. Now, I'm going to paste that in. So the clamp function here, I'm going to try to zoom here, is you can ignore this little warning here. It does work in the, this code does work, so you can ignore that. But concentrate here on clamp. So what this does is allow you to give your font size a minimum size, and that's the first value here. The middle value is kind of like your fluid font value. And it's set to 2 VW, which is basically 2% of the viewport width or the width of your browser. And then the last one would be the max font size, which is 24 pixels. So I'm using an absolute length unit for the min and the max font size. But in the middle here, I'm using a relative or a fluid font size. So that way, whenever needed, it's going to adjust in a nice fluid manner. Okay, so that's very important to do. Don't skip that step because everything is kind of built upon that font size. And I'm kind of basing it on what would be kind of like a traditional body font size. Like most browsers, default text or font size would be 16 pixels. So I'm using that as kind of the minimum. And then I'm giving it a maximum of 24 pixels. You really don't want, well, depending on your design and what you're looking for. Body text, normally doesn't go much past 24 pixels or something like that. Okay, so once that's in place, remember, everything's going to work from this font size. So kind of working from the inside out here. So once this base root font size is in place, we're going to use the EM length unit. to style everything else. And what that's going to do is allow you to basically base every value on that font size. So if you're not familiar with what an M or EM length unit does, basically it is relative to the root font size. So some of the elements in a Divi module are kind of behind the scenes, have some, absolute length units being used, for instance, like pixels. So for instance, this promotion, this promo description, if you were to go in and inspect it and look at it with your, browser dev tools or something like that, you'll see that it has like a bottom padding right underneath it here to separate it from the button. And that's up in pixels. So what I'm going to do is just override that. And I'm going to override it with an EM length unit. Okay. So I think, let's see, let's do, for the promo description, let's just do padding bottom, and this is overriding it, 1.5 EM. So you can see that it adjusted it a little bit. Kind of, actually, it's a little bigger. But now that 1.5, just to give you an example, it's basically saying 1.5 M. And that M, you can substitute this font size. So it's basically 150% of the font size. And since that font size has a fluid value to it, that padding is also going to have that fluid value as well. So it's 1.5 times whatever the root font size is. And the same thing for the button. I'm just going to, or the title, I should say. That's the one up here. This isn't necessary. I'm just being nitpicky here because I want to make it completely fluid. Like all the elements are going to scale nicely. So let's just do 1.5 M for that right below the title there. Same bottom padding. All right, so after that's in place, we kind of finished with the advanced tab here. Now we can do everything else from the built-in options under the design tab. So what to do first? What we're going to do first is the body text. All right, so the body text, right now you can see the body text size has a pixel. That's an absolute length unit. We want it to be relative to our root font size that we established already. So to do that, again, everything we're going to add is going to have that M, that EM length unit. So I'm going to do 1 M for the body text size. Now that is going to basically be the exact same as the root font size because we're putting a 1. So it's going to be kind of exactly corresponding to that same size. If I were to increase it to something like that, you can see it grows substantially. But we can, I'll show you how to adjust the different elements using the EM length units. The body line height, we're also going to use, by default, it does use the EM length unit for body line height. We're going to just kind of bring it up to 1.8. There you go. And let's jump over to the title text. So the title text, we want it to be a bit larger than our body text. So instead of the default 26 pixels that it's using now, we're going to use an EM length unit. So we're going to do 1.7 EM. As you can see now, our title is basically kind of where we want it. And right now it's kind of at the max of what it's going to be. So let's also set the title line height to something like 1.3 EM or M. So to give you like you might be wondering like, what is the value? What is the actual value of that? What is a 1.7 M? What is this in pixels? Well, if we're at our max, if you remember in the custom CSS, our max font size or root font size is 24 pixels. Well, if the max title font size, what is that going to be? Well, that's going to be 1.7 times 24 pixels, which, do the math, is about 69. I've already done the math, but it's 69.36. So it's roughly 70 pixels. So the max the title is going to be is 70 pixels in size. So it kind of gives you a gauge as to how to determine what these values are. All right. Now that our title text is in place, let's do the button real quick. Let's go to our button. We're going to use custom styles for our button. As you can see, the button text size is in pixels. We're going to add an EM length unit. We're going to do 1.3 for the button. And here's where we can get a little creative here. So our button border width is set to 2 pixels. We want it to also scale fluidly, or add that fluid design element to the border. But we don't want to add like something like 1M. That's going to be way too big. So what we're going to do is add a percent, kind of like a 0.1 is better, kind of close to what we want here. And I'm just going to put 0.12, which is going to roughly make it around, 20 pixels max. I'm sorry, 2 pixels max around that on the button border width. The button border radius, we're going to add a 1.5 M. Let's see. There we go. So we can add EM length units to really anything we need. So we're going to set the border radius to an EM length unit, which is going to round it off nicely. And if we wanted to add some letter spacing, we can also use the EM length unit. We're going to do a 0.1 EM. And you can see that now our letter spacing now has an EM length unit, which is going to add that fluid design element to it. And for our button padding, let's scroll down and update our button padding. By default, the button padding does use EM length units because you do want that button to scale with the font size. So that's convenient. So it will work as it is now, but we can add our own custom padding. Let's make it a little bit shorter in the top and bottom. So it's, narrow out the padding. So I'm going to use 0.1 EM for the top and bottom. And for the left, let's do 2 EM for the left and right. Okay, that's looking good. I'm going to pause here for a moment. We're ready to jump in and update the sizing of our module, but I have been ignoring you way too long in the chat, so let's look here. All right, our Bob says amazing. Can we do 3D spinning module stuff as well? Sometimes later to show the products. 3D spinning, that's a cool idea. We do have some 3D type design tutorials. If you search our blog, just type in 3D. I'm not sure about the actual spinning element, but we do have similar things to that. But yeah, definitely check our blog post to add the 3D element. All right. It's all about adding that perspective and then using our transform built-in options to kind of move it where we want to get that 3D effect. All right, so let's see. Mike has the question. Is it a must to have this gutter width set up, or can we skip it? Okay, so good question. The gutter width, the reason why I set it to 1 is because I wanted to take it out completely. I don't want any margin or between my column, or even though it's in a 1 column. But what it does is it also adds some spacing between modules as well. And the length unit used for the spacing is a percentage, which is not directly going to be based on the root font size that we have in our module. So basically, by taking it out, I'm just going to use I'm using the spacing. I'm going to space it out at the module level. That way it uses that root font size. And that's going to make it fluid. If I were to add, percentages with gutter width, it won't be completely fluid. A good question. All right, so let's see. Raghav asks, when is 5.0 coming? What a great question. And I wish I had an answer for you. That's one of those things where we are working hard, and really hard, to get that up and running for you guys. I'm looking forward to it as much, maybe even more than you guys, because of all the awesome features that we're going to be adding. But I'm not sure. Good question. And welcome Palitha from Sri Lanka. Omar has a question. Can I define the call to action module dimensions? Not sure what you mean by that. Dimensions. If you mean height and width and all that, that's kind of where we're going to right now. So I'm going to transition to our sizing settings. So how are we going to add or incorporate fluid design to our size, to the size of our module? What we're going to do is, again, add the EM length unit to the width. Now, I'm going to set it to, first, let's just do 40 EM. Okay, so that's, and you can kind of play around with the size. So when you're on desktop, it'll be at its kind of like its max width. But let's see. Oh, let's not add it to the main width. Let's do it max width, because we want to keep that width to auto. So I'm going to add it to the max width. So max width was going to be 40 EM. So so the smallest it's going to be, or the smallest max width, will be 40 times 16 pixels. Somewhere around, I don't know. You do the math, 500, 600, something like that, pixels. After the max width is set, though, we want to make sure that it's centered. Now, oh, one more thing, the min height. Okay, so after testing this out, I realized that because we're using the font size, the clamp function that we used here, first, because we're using CSS clamp, that has issue, I guess, I don't know if it's a bug or whatever, but in Safari, that it doesn't really fluidly adjust when actually adjusting the browser. It will show up fine when you load the page. So to circumvent that, I just kind of found this hack or trick. You just set this to a min height of is it 0 VW? Yeah, so the min height is going to be 0 VW, which doesn't do anything basically except fix that little bug in Safari. So I'm going to add it there. Let's see, margin. Let's do margin next. So as you can see, I didn't align my, like for example, I could put module alignment to center here, but I'm going to update the I'm going to just add it to the margin directly, and I'll show you to do that, how to do that. If I set the left margin to auto and then the right to auto, it's roughly doing the same thing. And so that's what I'm going to do. So my margin on the left and right is going to be set to auto. That's going to center it. And I'm just doing that because I'm thinking ahead whenever we're going to add another module to this. It's important that we have that margin set this way because we're going to update the margin later on. All right, so the padding. Well, we're going to add some top margin. Let's do 0.5 M for the top, just to add a little bit of margin there. And again, using EM length units, always when we can. So the padding is going to be 2.5 M on the top and bottom. So we're adding padding to our module now. And then 2 M on the left and right. So now we got some padding, which is nice. And as we are, let's just pause for a moment. I'm going to save the changes. And let's just take a look at what this looks like on a live page. And let's inspect it so we can see as we adjust it, what's going to happen. So as we adjust it, once it gets to the point where it needs that, what do we call it? The fluid design is going to kick in. So right now it's kind of using the max font size, the root font size. And then it's going to kick into the fluid when it needs it until it gets to the minimum. And then there it goes. That's the minimum. And then as you can see, it scales nice and fluidly with the browser. And all those elements, padding, button border width, text size, all of that. The width of the module. So it's looking good. So that's the basics. So that's how you kind of do or add the fluid design to a Divi module. The next thing I'm going to show you is basically how to add another one on the same row if you wanted to, which is important to know. So to do this, as I mentioned earlier, and by the way, before I jump into this next step, we are going to add another module here in a moment and show you how to kind of put them adjacent to one another. But before I do that, I do want to, welcome you if you're just joining us and just kind of lost right now. Today, we're doing a live stream on how to add or create a responsive fluid Divi module. So don't forget to check the video description for more information, including a link to the blog post that goes along with this. And if you don't have the Divi theme yet and want to learn more about it, there's a link to our product page as well. So check that out. All right, let's go back. Any questions? Ahmad asks, so you are replacing pixels into EM sizes to make it responsive? Yes, and the way that that works is because the EM length unit is based on or relative to the root font size. So it's directly relative to that font size. So as long as you have that font size has a fluid element to that font size, like we added, it will then be adopted by every element that has the EM length unit. That makes sense. Short answer, yes. Good question. All right. Let's add another module and let's set up our grid here. We're going to use at the column level, but before we do that, let's go ahead and jump into our module. We don't want it to be this big because we want to think, okay, now we're going to make it into two. We're going to add two modules, so it's going to be two column set up here. Two modules adjacent to one another. Right now, the max font size or max size of my modules is a bit big for that. So I'm going to shrink it to 24 EM for my max width for my module. And that's going to leave me room to add another one right next to it. And let's go ahead and go up here and change the text alignment to left, just because I want to. Okay. And because we are going to add spacing around our module or between our modules at the module level with EM length units, we're going to do that now. So I'm going to add some margin to my module. Right now it's set to auto, but I'm going to add 0.5 EM. I can't type, sorry. 0.5 EM on the left and right. You can see it, that little space right there. And so that way when I add another module to the adjacent on the right here, I'll have some spacing in between it. And I can, increase it, as needed if I wanted more spacing. But this is kind of the sweet spot right before we get to that tablet view. So I'm just kind of keeping it at a minimal, that spacing to a minimal value there. So 0.5 EM, and let's save that. And now I'm just going to duplicate this module. All right. And to make it adjacent, we're not going to do I'm not going to put it into a two column layout or anything. I'm just going to actually go to that one column and I'm going to add I'm going to use display or the CSS grid to kind of make sure that those two modules have an auto width. Or to say it another way, we're going to create a column structure that allows for each one of those modules to have to be contained in a column per se that has an auto width, because that's very important. We want to make sure and not limit it or constrain it. So to do that, let's go to our column settings, go to under the advanced tab, and you can actually use display grid or display flex to kind of do this. We use it a lot in our tutorials, just to kind of make things nice and aligned or vertically aligned, things like that. But I'm going to add this custom CSS and you can see how it magically does its thing. But if I just look at it here, what am I doing? Well, I'm using display grid, which is going to basically turn every element within that column into a grid. In this case, these are modules. So each module will become a grid item. And so the grid template columns basically sets up how many columns you want and what width you want them. So right now I have two. So one column has a width of auto and another column that has a width of auto. And I'm justifying the content to center and make sure it stays centered on the page. But, once that's in place, you can, have that auto width that you need for your fluid design. But let's say for instance, we want the two column layout on desktop, but on mobile, we want, as you can see, that's too small, right? Or too narrow. We want to change it to a one column layout. Well, we can do that easily by updating this code here. I'll show you. Real simple. I just took out one of those auto rows or columns and changed it to 1. That way it will keep every element within that column, or sorry, go from a 2-column to a 1-column layout for my modules. Simple. All right. Now, let's save it out. And let's look at it on the live site. As you can see, it will start to kick in when needed, right? There's my fluid design at work. And once we get to tablet, it's going to stack to a 1-column. So now everything is nice and fluid in place, and you don't have to worry about updating, those different media queries or updating the responsive tabs in Divi for tablet, phone, and desktop. It will automatically adjust fluidly with your browser and give you that nice fluid design. Let's see if we have any questions. So Mike says, thanks for the awesome explanation. Appreciate it. I can basically export this in JSON and use it in a different website, or is there another faster way? Yes. So the blog post does have a free download of the layout that was created, and you can download that for free. Just enter your email or whatever, and the download button will appear. And then you can download the JSON file and then upload it to your Divi library and pull it up and use it as needed. That way you can play around with the adjustments, add your own design, and all of that. So and you can see just by adding, some, different colors to your module, like module background, title color, font choice can change, the colors of your buttons, the button border row color, all of that can easily be adjusted. And a lot of those, don't require the EM length unit. So you can see, just as an example, here's, background color of the section here, and then the same functionality is in play with your own design. Sorry, I'm a little bit quick with my example here. You can see that fluid design. Awesome. I think that about wraps it up. Let's see if we have any more questions. Ahmad says, great one. Thank you for the info. I've been doing it with VW and VH, but now I can try with the EM, as I see it's a great way of doing it. Quick way of adjusting. Yep. And you said that I am a hero, which I very much don't deserve, but appreciate. Yeah, it does save time and make it more convenient to adjust settings. I guess technically, fluid design, it kind of gets complicated when you're trying to distinguish between responsive design, fluid design. I've even heard of, this is kind of like an elastic design, because everything kind of constricts and expands fluidly. But fluid design can, on a basic level, can just apply to, your layout structure, like making sure your row has a V or your row has a percentage, is based on percentage, not like pixel, things like that. But overall, this kind of gives you a more fluid, elastic design, and it's really great for keeping the design looking consistent. And that's the main thing, because you really like the way it looks, but you don't want that to start breaking when you get to different browser widths. And this makes sure that everything looks exactly the same except just smaller, right? Keeps that design consistent. All right, thanks, Marcy. I have another question. Is it possible to watch the live recording somewhere later? Yes, on our this will be available on our YouTube and Facebook, our Facebook page, our YouTube channel later after the recording has ended. Just give it a little time to update and it'll show up. But that is a good question. Yeah, and thank you for replying to that. All right, awesome. I think that about does it. Any last questions? Always, I know there's always going to be a last question as soon as I end the live stream. So, but feel free to submit a comment on the video once it's up on our channels. All right, guys, that's all I got for you today. Thanks for joining us for the live stream tutorial. Give us a thumbs up if you like the video. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our blog newsletter, our YouTube channel, and like us on Facebook. And make sure to click to get those notifications. That way we can let you know every single time we have something new for you. And don't forget to check out our next live stream next week, Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern. We look forward to seeing you there. And that's it. Thanks again for watching. We look forward to seeing you in our next video.